I knew something was wrong the moment I pulled into my driveway and saw the neon orange envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. My name is Yates Anderson, and I had just returned from a successful day at the local car show in Phoenix, Arizona, where my 1956 Ford F-100 had drawn more attention than I could have imagined. The truck was my pride and joy, a restoration project that had taken me 3 years of weekends, late nights, and every spare dollar I could scrape together. The Arizona sun gleamed off its mint green paint job, and the chrome bumpers reflected the palm trees lining our suburban street like mirrors. I grabbed the envelope and tore it open, my good mood evaporating instantly. The letter was printed on official Sunset Ridge HOA letterhead, complete with their pretentious logo of a sun setting over manicured lawns. The message was clear and infuriating. I was being fined $500 for parking an unsightly commercial vehicle in my driveway, in violation of Section 7.3 of the Community Covenants. Commercial vehicle. My truck was a classic, a piece of American automotive history, not some beat-up work van. I stormed into my house, the screen door slamming behind me loud enough to wake my neighbor's dog 3 houses down. My hands were shaking as I reread the letter, looking for any hint of logic or reason. The fine was dated today, which meant someone had been watching for me to return. The letter was signed by Patricia Whitmore, the HOA president, a woman whose name had become synonymous with misery in our neighborhood over the past 2 years since she had taken office. I had moved to Sunset Ridge 18 months ago, attracted by the reasonable home prices and the promise of a quiet suburban life. The development was typical of the sprawling Phoenix suburbs, with stucco houses in shades of beige and tan, red tile roofs, and yards filled with desert landscaping. For the first year, I had kept my head down, paid my dues, and avoided any trouble with the HOA. I knew they could be particular about things like lawn maintenance and exterior paint colors, but I had always been careful to follow the rules. The truck had been in my garage for most of the time I had owned it, only coming out for occasional drives and the restoration work I did in my driveway on weekends. But last month, I had finally finished the project. The engine purred like a kitten. The interior was roof-upholstered in period-correct vinyl, and every piece of trim had been either restored or replaced with original parts I had hunted down from swap meets and online forums across the country. I had started parking it in my driveway because, frankly, I wanted people to see it. I was proud of what I had accomplished. The next morning, I called the HOA office as soon as they opened at 9. The phone rang 6 times before a bored-sounding receptionist answered. I explained who I was and why I was calling, trying to keep my voice level and professional. "I need to speak with Patricia Whitmore about this fine," I said. "There has been a mistake. My truck is not a commercial vehicle. Mrs. Whitmore is very busy," the receptionist replied in a tone that suggested she had delivered this line 1,000 times. "But I can schedule you for the next board meeting. That would be 3 weeks from Thursday." 3 weeks? I have 7 days to pay this fine or it doubles. "It says so right here in the letter." "Then I suggest you pay the fine, Mr. Anderson. You can always dispute it at the meeting." I hung up before I said something I would regret. $500 was not pocket change for me. I worked as a mechanical engineer for an aerospace company in Temp. And while the job paid decently, the mortgage, student loans, and the cost of the truck restoration had left my savings account looking pretty thin. Paying a fine for something that was completely unjustified felt like throwing money into a fire. I decided to go over to Patricia's house directly. I knew where she lived because everyone in the neighborhood knew where she lived. Her house was on Sagaro Lane, the street that bordered the community park, and it was the only one with a flagpole in the front yard flying both the American flag and a custom flag with the HOA logo. The irony of someone so obsessed with rules having such a tacky display was not lost on me. I rang her doorbell at 10 in the morning, still dressed in my work clothes because I had taken the morning off to deal with this mess. Patricia answered the door wearing a velour tracksuit in an aggressive shade of purple and oversized sunglasses perched on top of her bleached blonde hair. She looked to be in her early 50s, with the kind of deep tan that came from spending too much time by the pool and not enough time applying sunscreen. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What brings you to my door?" "This," I said, holding up the orange envelope. "This fine for my truck. It is not a commercial vehicle, Mrs. Whitmore. It is a vintage truck, a classic car. I use it for personal transportation." She crossed her arms over her chest and looked at me like I was a child who had just tracked mud through her house. "The covenant is very clear, Mr. Anderson. No commercial vehicles, work trucks, or vehicles displaying business signage may be parked in driveways or visible from the street. Your truck is clearly a work truck." "It is a 1956 Ford F-100, I said slowly, as if explaining to someone particularly dense. "It is 69 years old. It is a collector's item. There is no business signage on it. I do not use it for work. It is my personal vehicle." "It is a truck," she said, her voice hardening. "Trucks are commercial vehicles. If you want to keep it, put it in your garage. My garage is full of my tools and my daily driver. This truck deserves to be seen. I spent 3 years restoring it." "Then you should have thought about that before you moved into a community with standards," Patricia said, and started to close the door. I put my hand on the door frame, not pushing, just preventing her from shutting me out. "I want this taken to the board. This fine is ridiculous." "Fine," she said. "The next meeting is 3 weeks from Thursday, 7 o'clock. Now remove your hand from my property before I call the police." I stepped back, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Patricia slammed the door and I stood there for a moment, trying to calm down before I walked back to my house. I could feel eyes on me from the neighboring houses. In a place like Sunset Ridge, drama was entertainment, and I had just provided the morning show. Over the next few days, I did my research. I pulled out my copy of the HOA covenants, a document so dense and convoluted it could have been written by lawyers specifically to confuse homeowners. Section 7.3 did indeed prohibit commercial vehicles, but the definition was vague. It mentioned vehicles used primarily for business purposes and vehicles displaying commercial signage. My truck fit neither category. I also discovered that classic and antique vehicles were supposed to be exempt under Section 7.3.5. A subsection I was certain Patricia had either ignored or conveniently forgotten. I started documenting everything. I took photos of my truck from every angle, highlighting the complete absence of business signage. I pulled up the title and registration, both of which listed it as a classic vehicle with special vintage plates from the Arizona Department of Transportation. I even found the receipt from the car show, which listed my truck in the classic truck category and included a third-place ribbon I had won. While I was building my case, I also started hearing from my neighbors. The first was Tom, who lived 2 doors down. He knocked on my door on a Saturday afternoon, holding a beer and looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Yates," he said. "I just wanted to say I think what Patricia is doing is garbage. Your truck looks great. My kid loves seeing it when we walk the dog." "Thanks, Tom," I said, genuinely touched. "I appreciate that. For what it is worth, She tried to fine me last year for having my trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day. I had put them out the night before because I had to leave for work early. She wanted $200. I fought it and won, but it took months and it was a huge pain. How did you win? I proved that the covenant said trash cans could not be left out for more than 24 hours after collection. Since collection had not happened yet, I was in the clear. But she made me get a lawyer to write a formal letter. Cost me $300, more than the fine would have been. This was a pattern I was starting to notice. Patricia seemed to thrive on finding violations and issuing fines, even when the violations were questionable at best. I thanked Tom for the support and went back to preparing for the board meeting. The 3 weeks crawled by. Every morning I expected to find another orange envelope, but Patricia seemed content to wait for the board meeting. I parked my truck in the driveway every single day, partly out of spite and partly because I genuinely had nowhere else to put it. My daily driver, a practical Honda Accord, took up most of the garage space, and I was not about to start rearranging my entire life because of Patricia's power trip. The night of the board meeting finally arrived. The meetings were held in the community clubhouse, a bland beige building next to the pool that smelled perpetually of chlorine and old coffee. I arrived 15 minutes early, clutching a folder full of my documentation. The room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the board members sat. Patricia was already there, shuffling papers and looking self-important. The other board members were Larry Henderson, a retired accountant who always looked half asleep, and Denise Crawford, a real estate agent who seemed more interested in checking her phone than participating in the meetings. The room filled up slowly. I was surprised to see how many of my neighbors had shown up. Tom was there, along with several other people I recognized from the neighborhood. Some of them gave me encouraging nods. Others just looked curious, probably hoping for some entertainment. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 sharp, running through the usual business with mechanical efficiency. Budget reports, landscaping contract renewals, pool maintenance updates. I sat through it all, my leg bouncing with nervous energy. Finally, after 30 excruciating minutes, Patricia looked up from her notes and said, "Now we will address the matter of Mr. Yates Anderson and his covenant violation." I stood up, folder in hand, but Patricia waved me back down. "You will have a chance to speak, Mr. Anderson. First, I will present the HOA's case." She launched into a presentation that was clearly prepared in advance, complete with printed photos of my truck. She argued that the truck was a commercial vehicle based on its classification as a pickup truck, that it was an eyesore that lowered property values, and that allowing it would set a precedent that could lead to other homeowners parking work vehicles in their driveways. She spoke for nearly 10 minutes, her voice rising with righteous indignation. When she finally finished, she looked at me with an expression of smug satisfaction. "Mr. Anderson, you may now present your defense." I stood up and walked to the front of the room, opening my folder. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. First, I would like to address the claim that my truck is a commercial vehicle. According to the Arizona Department of Transportation, my 1956 Ford F-100 is registered as a classic vehicle. I have the registration here, along with special vintage plates that are only issued to vehicles that are at least 25 years old and maintained in original or restored condition." I held up the registration for everyone to see. Patricia's expression did not change, but I saw Larry lean forward slightly, suddenly looking more awake. "Second," I continued, "Section 7.3.5 of our covenant specifically exempts classic and antique vehicles from the commercial vehicle prohibition. I have highlighted the relevant text here. I passed copies of the covenant page to each board member, along with copies for anyone in the audience who wanted one. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line, but she did not interrupt. "Third," I said, "my truck is not used for business purposes. I use it for personal transportation and recreation. I do not have any business signage on it. In fact, I recently entered it in the Phoenix Classic Car Show, where it won third place in the classic truck category. I have the ribbon and documentation here." I could see some of the audience members nodding. Tom gave me a thumbs up from the back row. "Finally," I said, "I would like to address the claim that my truck is an eyesore. I have spent 3 years and a significant amount of money restoring this vehicle to its original condition. The paint is professional quality, the chrome is polished, and every detail has been carefully maintained. I have received nothing but compliments from my neighbors. In fact, several of them are here tonight and can attest to that if needed." I looked at Patricia, who was staring at me with barely concealed anger. "I believe this fine is unjustified and should be dismissed. If the board disagrees, I am prepared to take this matter to a formal arbitration hearing, as is my right under Arizona HOA law." I sat down, my heart pounding. The room was silent for a moment. Then Larry cleared his throat. "Patricia," he said, "it does seem like the truck qualifies as a classic vehicle under Section 7.3.5. I do not think we have grounds to fine him." Patricia's face flushed red. "The covenant says commercial vehicles, Larry." "A truck is a commercial vehicle. But the subsection makes an exception for classics," Larry said, looking down at the paper I had given him. "It is right here. I do not see how we can ignore that." Denise finally looked up from her phone. "I agree with Larry. Also, I have seen the truck. It is actually really nice. I do not think it is hurting property values." Patricia looked like she was about to explode. "This is setting a dangerous precedent. If we allow this, people will start parking all sorts of vehicles in their driveways." "Then we can address those on a case-by-case basis," Larry said. "But in this case, I think Mr. Anderson is right. I move to dismiss the fine." "I second," Denise said immediately. Patricia looked between them, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Fine," she finally spat. "All in favor?" Larry and Denise raised their hands. Patricia did not. "The motion passes," Larry said. "The fine is dismissed." The room erupted in scattered applause. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed immediately by a surge of triumph. I had won. Patricia glared at me from the head table, and I knew this was not over. Someone like her did not take defeat gracefully. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to congratulate me. Tom clapped me on the shoulder and invited me to a barbecue the following weekend. An older woman named Helen, who lived on the corner, told me she had been wanting to stand up to Patricia for months, but had never had the courage. "You did good, young man," she said. "That woman needs to be taken down a peg or two." I drove home feeling like I had just won a major battle, but the war was far from over. I parked my truck in the driveway, right where it had been every day for the past month, and went inside. The next morning, I woke up to find another orange envelope. This time, the fine was for excessive noise during evening hours. The letter claimed that I had been working on my truck after 8 p.m., in violation of the community's noise ordinance. The fine was $300. I stood in my driveway, staring at the letter in disbelief. I had not worked on the truck in weeks. The restoration was complete. There was nothing to work on. This was pure retaliation, and it was obvious. I took photos of the letter and immediately sent an email to Larry and Denise, the 2 board members who had sided with me. I explained that I had not worked on the truck in weeks and that this was clearly Patricia abusing her position. Larry responded within an hour, saying he would look into it. Denise replied with a short message. "This is getting out of hand." Over the next week, I received 2 more fines. One for improper yard maintenance, because apparently my desert landscaping rocks were not evenly distributed. Another for unauthorized exterior modification, because I had hung a small American flag on my front porch for Memorial Day weekend. Each fine was between $200 and $400. The letters kept coming, always in those neon orange envelopes, always signed by Patricia Whitmore. I refused to pay any of them. Instead, I documented everything and prepared for another fight. But I was also getting exhausted. The constant harassment was wearing me down, affecting my work and my sleep. I found myself dreading coming home, wondering what new violation Patricia would dream up next. Then something unexpected happened. I received a phone call from a man named Gregory Zhang, who introduced himself as a vintage vehicle appraiser based in Scottsdale. He said he had heard about my truck through the grapevine, the classic car community in Arizona being smaller and more connected than most people realized. He asked if I would be interested in having the truck professionally appraised. "Why would I need an appraisal?" I asked, confused. "Documentation," Gregory said. "If your HOA is claiming your truck is worthless or an eyesore, an official appraisal can prove otherwise. It also helps if you ever need to insure it properly or if you decide to sell it down the line. I do not charge much, just $200 for a full appraisal with documentation." I thought about it. $200 was less than most of the fines Patricia had been throwing at me, and having official documentation of the truck's value seemed like it could only help my case. I agreed, and we scheduled the appraisal for the following Saturday. Gregory showed up right on time, driving a pristine 1967 Mustang that made my truck look almost humble by comparison. He was a thin man in his 60s with silver hair, and the kind of careful, precise movements that suggested a lifetime of working with valuable things. He spent nearly 2 hours examining every inch of my truck, taking photos, checking serial numbers, and even crawling underneath to inspect the frame and undercarriage. "You did good work here," he said, running his hand along the truck's fender. "Really good work. The paint job alone is professional quality. Where did you have it done?" "I did it myself," I said, not without pride. "I have a friend with a spray booth in his shop. He let me use it and taught me the technique." Gregory nodded approvingly. He took more photos, made notes on a tablet, and finally stood back to survey the truck one more time. "Give me a few days to write up the full report," he said. "But I can tell you right now, you are sitting on a valuable vehicle. These F-100s from the mid-50s are highly collectible, especially in this condition." "How valuable are we talking?" I asked, curious. Gregory smiled. "Let me finish the appraisal first. I will send you the full report by Wednesday." He was true to his word. The appraisal arrived in my email exactly 3 days later, and when I opened the PDF, I nearly fell out of my chair. According to Gregory's professional assessment, my 1956 Ford F-100 was valued at $150,000. I read the number 3 times to make sure I was not hallucinating. $150,000. Gregory's report was exhaustive, detailing every aspect of the restoration, the rarity of the specific model and configuration, the quality of the work, and recent sale prices of comparable vehicles. He noted that the F-100 market had been climbing steadily over the past few years, with fully restored examples commanding premium prices from collectors. I sat back in my chair, stunned. I had known the truck was worth something, but I had never imagined this. I had maybe $15,000 invested in it, including the initial purchase price and all the parts and materials. The labor had been mine, done over countless weekends and evenings in my garage and driveway. To learn that it was worth 10 times what I had put into it was surreal. I immediately made copies of the appraisal and sent them to Larry and Denise. I also sent a copy to my insurance agent, who promptly called me in a mild panic to upgrade my coverage. But most importantly, I printed out a copy on high-quality paper and put it in a presentation folder. This was my nuclear option, my trump card for the next time Patricia tried to claim my truck was an eyesore or a worthless piece of junk. I did not have to wait long. 2 weeks later, I received notice of another board meeting, this time specifically called to address my ongoing covenant violations. The letter listed all the fines Patricia had issued, now totaling over $2,000 with late fees and penalties. It demanded that I either pay the fines or face legal action from the HOA. I showed up to the meeting with my folder, my documentation, and a determination to end this once and for all. The room was even more packed than the last meeting. Word had spread through the neighborhood that Patricia was going after me hard, and apparently people were interested to see how it would play out. Patricia started the meeting with her usual efficiency, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew this was not going to go her way, but she was too stubborn to back down. Mr. Anderson has refused to pay legitimate fines for multiple covenant violations, she began, her voice tight. This is unacceptable behavior and sets a terrible precedent for our community. I propose that we move forward with legal action to compel payment and, if necessary, place a lien on his property. There were gasps from the audience. A lien was serious business, something that could affect my ability to sell or refinance my home. Patricia was escalating, trying to force me into submission through sheer financial pressure. Larry looked uncomfortable. Patricia, I think we need to discuss whether these fines were legitimate in the first place. Several of them seem questionable. They are all based on clear covenant violations, Patricia said sharply. Mr. Anderson has been working on his vehicle at all hours. His yard is not properly maintained, and he has made unauthorized modifications to his home's exterior. I stood up. May I address these claims? Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but Larry nodded. Go ahead, Yates. First, the noise violation. I have not worked on my truck in over 2 months. The restoration is complete. I have not even started the engine after 8 p.m. in all the time I have lived here. I would like to know what evidence the HOA has that I violated the noise ordinance. Patricia shuffled some papers. We received a complaint from a neighbor. Which neighbor? I asked. I would like to face my accuser. Patricia's jaw clenched. The complaints are kept confidential to protect residents from retaliation. Convenient, I said. Second, the yard maintenance fine. My landscaping is desert appropriate and maintained according to the community standards. I would like to know specifically what was wrong with it. The rocks were unevenly distributed, Patricia said. According to whom? I have photos of my yard from the day I received that fine. The rocks are exactly as they have been since I moved in. Nothing had changed. I pulled out printed photos and passed them to the board members. Larry studied them and shook his head. This looks fine to me, he said. And the flag, I continued. I hung a small American flag on my porch for Memorial Day. Section 12.8 of our covenant specifically allows the display of the American flag. I have that section highlighted here. I distributed more papers. Patricia was starting to look cornered, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. These fines are harassment, I said, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. They are retaliation for me challenging the original truck fine. And speaking of my truck, I have something that might interest the board. I pulled out the appraisal and held it up. I recently had my 1956 Ford F-100 professionally appraised by Gregory Zhang, a certified vintage vehicle appraiser. According to his assessment, my truck is currently valued at $150,000. The room went silent. Even Patricia looked shocked. $150,000, I repeated. That is not a worthless eyesore. That is a valuable collector's item, a piece of American automotive history. Mr. Zhang's report details the rarity of the vehicle, the quality of the restoration, and the current market for vehicles like this. I am happy to provide copies to anyone who wants to see it. I started handing out copies of the appraisal. People were flipping through the pages, their eyes widening as they read the details and saw the valuation. This truck is an asset, not a liability, I said. If anything, having a vehicle of this value and quality in our neighborhood should increase property values, not decrease them. The idea that it is somehow dragging down our community is not just wrong, it is absurd. Larry was reading the appraisal with genuine interest. This is remarkable, Yates. I had no idea these trucks were worth this much. Most people do not, I said. But the classic car market is strong, especially for well-restored American trucks from the 50s. My truck is not some beater I use for hauling mulch. It is a meticulously maintained collector's vehicle that happens to be parked in my driveway because I am proud of it. Patricia finally found her voice. The value is irrelevant. The covenant says no commercial vehicles. And the covenant also exempts classic vehicles, Larry said, his voice taking on an edge I had not heard before. We already went over this, Patricia. We voted to dismiss that fine. And now it looks like every fine you have issued since then has been either fabricated or grossly exaggerated. This is not acceptable, Denise nodded. I agree. This has gone too far. Patricia, you cannot just fine people because you are upset with them. That is abuse of your position. Patricia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I am trying to maintain the standards of this community. If you two do not have the spine to enforce our covenants, then maybe you should not be on this board. And maybe you should not be either, a voice called from the audience. It was Tom, my neighbor. You have been using the HOA like your personal fiefdom. This is not the first time you have gone after someone unfairly. Other voices joined in, people sharing their own stories of questionable fines and Patricia's heavy-handed enforcement. The meeting devolved into chaos, with Patricia trying to shout over everyone and Larry banging a gavel to restore order. Finally, after 10 minutes of mayhem, Larry managed to quiet everyone down. I move that all fines issued to Mr. Anderson after the first board meeting be dismissed as unsubstantiated, he said. I second, Denise said immediately. Patricia looked between them, her face now pale. You cannot do this. We can and we are, Larry said. All in favor. He and Denise raised their hands. Patricia did not vote. The motion passes, Larry said. Mr. Anderson, all fines are dismissed. You owe the HOA nothing. The room erupted in applause. I felt tears prick at my eyes, a combination of relief and vindication washing over me. I had won, truly won this time, but Patricia was not done. She grabbed her papers and her purse and stormed toward the door. You are all going to regret this, she said. This community is going to go to hell without proper leadership. Then maybe it is time for new leadership, Helen, the older woman from the corner, called out. I nominate Larry Henderson for HOA president. I second, someone else said. Larry looked startled but pleased. Well, that would need to be voted on at a proper election, but I appreciate the support. Patricia slammed the door on her way out, the sound echoing through the clubhouse. The meeting wrapped up quickly after that, with Larry promising to look into scheduling a special election for the board positions. I walked out of the clubhouse feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Tom and several other neighbors came over to shake my hand and congratulate me. Helen gave me a hug and told me I had done the whole neighborhood a favor. The next few weeks were quiet. Patricia stopped issuing fines, stopped showing up to her HOA office hours, and generally disappeared from neighborhood life. Rumors circulated that she was planning to move, that she had been forced to resign, that she was consulting lawyers. I did not pay much attention. As far as I was concerned, the matter was closed. Then things took an unexpected turn. I came home from work one evening to find 2 police cars parked outside the clubhouse. My stomach dropped. Had Patricia done something crazy? Had someone gotten hurt? I parked my truck and walked over, joining a small crowd of neighbors who were watching from a distance. Tom was there and he filled me in. Apparently, the HOA hired an independent auditor to review the finances, he said in a low voice. You know, standard procedure for a leadership change. They found some major discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? I asked. The kind that involve missing money, Tom said. A lot of missing money. Over the next few days, the full story came out. The auditor had discovered that Patricia had been embezzling HOA funds for over a year. It started small, inflated invoices for landscaping services that were never fully performed, payments to contractors who did not exist. But it had escalated to direct transfers from the HOA account to her personal account, totaling nearly $80,000. The police arrested Patricia at her home. The local news covered it, a brief segment about HOA corruption that featured a perp walk of Patricia being led to a police car in handcuffs. I watched it on my phone, sitting in my driveway next to my truck, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I had not liked Patricia, but I had never imagined she was a criminal. The legal process moved slowly, as these things do. Patricia was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of homeowner association funds. The HOA hired a lawyer to try to recover the money, though it turned out Patricia had spent most of it on luxury purchases, vacations, and gambling debts. The community was left with a depleted reserve fund and a lot of angry homeowners. Larry was elected as the new HOA president in a special election that saw the highest voter turnout in Sunset Ridge history. One of his first acts was to issue a formal apology to me on behalf of the HOA for the harassment I had endured. He also proposed a revision to the covenants to more clearly define what constituted a commercial vehicle and to strengthen protections for classic and antique cars. The revisions passed with overwhelming support. My truck was officially recognized as a valuable asset to the community, and several other neighbors who owned classic cars started parking them in their driveways, no longer afraid of arbitrary fines. Life in Sunset Ridge gradually returned to normal, though it was a new normal, one with more transparency and less fear. The HOA board started holding regular town halls where residents could voice concerns without worrying about retaliation. The community felt more like an actual community and less like a dictatorship. As for my truck, it became something of a neighborhood landmark. Kids asked their parents if they could take pictures with it. The local classic car club asked if I would bring it to their monthly meets. I even got a few offers to buy it, though I turned them all down. The truck was not for sale. It represented too much, not just in monetary value but in personal achievement and the battle I had fought to keep it. One Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after Patricia's arrest, I was washing the truck in my driveway when Gregory Zhang pulled up in his Mustang. He got out, admiring the truck's shine in the Arizona sun. "Still looking good," he said. "Thanks to your appraisal," I replied. "That report saved me a lot of trouble." "I heard about what happened," Gregory said. "The whole classic car community has been talking about it. You are something of a legend now, the guy who stood up to his HOA with a truck appraisal." I laughed. "I never thought I would be famous for anything, much less that." "You should bring the truck to the Barrett-Jackson auction next year," Gregory said. "Not to sell, just to display. They have a showcase for exceptional restorations. Your truck would fit right in." I considered it. Barrett-Jackson was one of the premier classic car auctions in the world, held annually in Scottsdale. Having my truck displayed there would be an incredible honor. "I will think about it," I said. Gregory nodded and pulled out his phone. "Actually, I wanted to show you something. Remember how I valued your truck at $150? How could I forget? Well, a similar truck just sold at an auction in California. Same year, same model, similar condition." He showed me the auction listing on his phone. It went for $175,000. I stared at the number, barely processing it. My truck had appreciated in value just sitting in my driveway. "The market keeps going up," Gregory said. "If you ever do decide to sell, you are looking at a serious payday, but my advice, keep it. Enjoy it. Cars like this are not just investments, they are pieces of history. They are meant to be driven and appreciated, not locked away in a climate-controlled garage." "I could not agree more," I said. Gregory left, and I went back to washing the truck, thinking about everything that had happened. A year ago, I had been a quiet guy, just trying to live my life and enjoy my hobby. Then Patricia and her fines had turned my world upside down. But in fighting back, I had discovered a strength I did not know I had. I had stood up for myself, stood up for what was right, and in the process, I had helped change my community for the better. The criminal trial for Patricia Whitmore took place 9 months after her arrest. I was called to testify, not about the embezzlement directly, but about the pattern of harassment and retaliation that had characterized her tenure as HOA president. The prosecutor argued that Patricia's abuse of power extended beyond just stealing money. She had used her position to intimidate and punish homeowners who challenged her authority, creating a climate of fear that allowed her financial crimes to go unnoticed. I sat in the witness box, wearing my best suit, and answered the prosecutor's questions honestly. I described the fines, the meetings, the constant orange envelopes. I talked about the stress it had caused, the fear of losing my home to a lien, the feeling of being powerless against someone who wielded the HOA rules like a weapon. Patricia sat at the defense table, looking diminished somehow, smaller than she had seemed when she was wielding her power in the neighborhood. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a dedicated volunteer who had made some mistakes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Patricia was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to the HOA, though everyone knew the chances of recovering the full amount were slim. As she was led out of the courtroom, she did not look at anyone, her head down, her designer handbag clutched in her hands. I felt no satisfaction watching her go to prison, just a sense of closure. Justice had been served, not just for me but for everyone she had harmed. Life moved on. I got a promotion at work, a recognition of the project I had been leading for the past year. The raise was significant enough that I started thinking about my next restoration project. Maybe a 1960s Corvette, or perhaps a classic motorcycle. The possibilities were endless, and now I knew I had a community that would support my hobby rather than fight against it. I also started dating someone, a woman named Amanda Vaughn who worked in the HR department at my company. We had crossed paths a few times at company events, But it was not until I mentioned my truck restoration at a casual Friday lunch that she showed real interest. Turns out Amanda's father had been a mechanic, and she had grown up around classic cars. Our first date was at a car show in Tucson, and I knew pretty quickly that she was someone special. Amanda loved the truck as much as I did. She was not intimidated by the mechanical side of things, often asking detailed questions about the restoration process and the choices I had made. When I told her the story of the HOA battle, she laughed and called me her rebel with a vintage truck. One evening, about a year after Patricia's sentencing, Amanda and I were sitting on my porch watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. My truck was parked in the driveway, gleaming in the fading light. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful in a way it had not been during Patricia's reign. "You know what I love about this place?" Amanda said, leaning against my shoulder. "What? It feels like a real community now. People actually talk to each other. They help each other. It is not just a bunch of houses next to each other." She was right. The change had been gradual but profound. Neighbors who had been afraid to make eye contact during Patricia's time now organized block parties and potluck dinners. The community park saw regular use, families playing in the evening, kids riding bikes. The HOA had gone from being a source of fear to being what it was supposed to be, a group of neighbors working together to maintain their shared spaces. "I think people were always decent," I said. "They just needed someone to stand up first, to show them it was possible." "You did that," Amanda said. "You should be proud." I was proud, though not in a boastful way. I had simply refused to accept injustice, and that refusal had rippled outward in ways I could never have anticipated. The following spring, I took Gregory's advice and submitted my truck for the Barrett-Jackson showcase. To my amazement and excitement, it was accepted. The auction took place over a week in January, and my truck was displayed in a place of honor among some of the finest classic vehicles in the country. Amanda and I attended together, along with Tom and several other neighbors who had supported me through the HOA ordeal. Seeing my truck under the bright lights, with a placard describing the restoration and its history, was one of the proudest moments of my life. People stopped to take pictures, to admire the work, to ask questions. I spent hours talking to fellow enthusiasts, sharing stories and techniques. A journalist from a classic car magazine interviewed me, interested not just in the truck, but in the story of how I had fought to keep it. The article ran a few months later, a 4-page spread with beautiful photos of the truck and a detailed account of the HOA battle. The headline read, "The Truck That Was Worth Fighting For." The article ended with a quote from me. "Classic cars are more than just metal and chrome. They are connections to our past, expressions of craftsmanship and passion. They deserve to be preserved and celebrated, not hidden away because someone finds them inconvenient." The article resonated with people. I received emails and messages from classic car owners across the country who had faced similar battles with HOAs, homeowners associations that prioritized uniform aesthetics over personal expression and historical preservation. Some of them had won their battles, others had lost. Reading their stories made me realize how lucky I had been to have neighbors who supported me and board members willing to stand up to a bully. I also heard from lawmakers in Arizona who were interested in strengthening protections for classic vehicle owners. One state representative introduced a bill that would explicitly prohibit HOAs from banning classic and antique vehicles, defining them clearly, and preventing the kind of vague interpretation that Patricia had exploited. The bill passed with bipartisan support and was signed into law. It was nicknamed the Yates Anderson Act in some circles. though the official title was much more bureaucratic. Knowing that my fight had led to real change, that other classic car owners in Arizona would not have to go through what I went through, was incredibly fulfilling. It was more than I had ever hoped for when I first tore open that orange envelope in my driveway. 2 years after the Barrett-Jackson showcase, Amanda and I got married. The wedding was small, held in the backyard of our home. Yes, we had bought a house together, a bigger place with a 3-car garage in a neighborhood with no HOA. My truck played a starring role in the ceremony, decorated with white ribbons and serving as our getaway vehicle. As we drove away from the reception, tin cans rattling behind us and friends and family cheering, I could not help but think about the journey that had brought me here. A truck. A simple hobby project that had turned into so much more. It had taught me about perseverance, about standing up for what was right, about the importance of community. It had brought me friendship, recognition, and ultimately love. I still have the truck. It sits in the garage of our new house, next to Amanda's project car, a 1972 Dodge Challenger she is slowly restoring. On weekends, we work on our vehicles together, music playing from a Bluetooth speaker, tools spread out on the garage floor. Sometimes neighbors drop by to admire our work, to share a beer, to talk about their own projects. The truck is now valued at over $200,000, according to the most recent appraisal. I could sell it tomorrow and make a substantial profit, but I will not. The truck is not for sale, not now, not ever. It represents too much of who I am, the challenges I have overcome, the life I have built. Every time I start the engine and hear that distinctive rumble of the vintage V8, I am reminded of that first orange envelope, of Patricia's sneer, of the moment I decided to fight back. I am reminded that sometimes the things worth having are the things worth fighting for, whether that is a vintage truck, a principle, or a community. The truck sits in my driveway sometimes, when I take it out for a weekend cruise. Kids in the neighborhood ask if they can sit in it, and I always say yes, lifting them into the cab and letting them pretend to drive. Their parents take pictures, and I tell them about the restoration, about the parts I hunted down, about the hours of work. I do not usually tell them about the HOA battle unless they ask. And when they do ask, because someone has mentioned it or they have read the article, I keep it simple. I tell them that I had a truck, someone tried to take it away, and I stood up for myself. The details matter less than the lesson. Do not let anyone diminish the things you love, the work you have put in, the passion you have cultivated. Sunset Ridge is a different place now. Larry served as HOA president for 3 years before stepping down, his legacy one of transparency and fairness. His successor, a younger guy named Marcus who works in tech, has continued that tradition. The HOA publishes detailed financial reports every quarter. Board meetings are recorded and posted online. Fines are rare and always justified with clear documentation. Patricia, as far as I know, served her full sentence and moved out of state after her release. I have not thought about her much in recent years. She was a part of my story, an antagonist who ultimately made me stronger, but she does not define the narrative. What defines it is the truck, still running strong after all these years. What defines it is the community we built, neighbors helping neighbors, supporting each other's passions and projects. What defines it is the knowledge that standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it would be easier to just pay the fine and move the truck into the garage, that standing up matters. Amanda and I talk sometimes about what we will do with the truck when we are older. Maybe we will donate it to a museum, let it be preserved as an example of mid-century American automotive design. Maybe we will pass it down to our kids if we have them, Let it become a family heirloom. Or maybe we will just keep driving it, keep maintaining it, keep sharing it with the world. The truck is more than a vehicle. It is a testament to craftsmanship, to dedication, to the belief that some things are worth the fight. It is a reminder that value is not always obvious, that what seems like a burden to one person can be treasure to another. I think about that sometimes when I am polishing the chrome or checking the oil, when I am doing the small maintenance tasks that keep the truck running smoothly. I think about the appraiser's report, the number that changed everything, $150,000. But I also think about the value that cannot be quantified, the pride of creation, the joy of preservation, the satisfaction of standing up to injustice. These are the things that matter. These are the things worth fighting for. And as long as I have my truck, parked proudly in my driveway where everyone can see it, I will remember that lesson. Some battles are worth fighting, some principles are worth defending, and some trucks are worth more than anyone could imagine. The sun sets over Arizona, painting the desert sky in brilliant colors. My truck sits in the driveway, a piece of history, a work of art, a symbol of everything I have learned and everything I have become. And I know with absolute certainty that I would do it all again. Every fight, every fine, every moment of stress and uncertainty. Because in the end I won. Not just the battle with the HOA, but the larger war for dignity, for respect, for the right to pursue my passions without fear. The truck is mine. The victory is mine, and no one can take that away.